You ready? Go.
Professor, people are aware of the importance of healthy narcissism. Are they? Really?
Narcissism has acquired a bad reputation. So people confuse healthy with unhealthy, and many people say there's no such thing as healthy narcissism, and so on and so forth. Healthy narcissism is, according to many scholars, starting with Freud and much later, is probably the most important foundational cornerstone of mental health, ironically. Healthy narcissism helps us to form a self-concept which is highly regulated and stable. Healthy narcissism regulates our sense of self-worth. Healthy narcissism is at the core of our self-esteem and self-confidence. Healthy narcissism provides us with the ability to distinguish the external world from the internal one. Healthy narcissism redirects our sexual energy so that it is invested in other people, object, libido as it used to be called, rather than narcissistic libido, and so on and so forth. Without healthy narcissism, there would be a major problem. Indeed, we have several mental illnesses where healthy narcissism is either missing or has mutated somehow into a pathological form. Narcissism, by the way, is a trait, and all people have the trait of narcissism. It's a universal trait. Everyone has the trait of narcissism, and like all traits, it's hereditary. It is genetic. The narcissism trait is indeed genetic, hereditary. And so the trait of narcissism is almost synonymous with the formation of identity and self, the ability to interact with other people from a safe, internalized, secure base, from a safe position regarding oneself. When you have healthy narcissism, you have a stable view of who you are, where you end and the world begins, what is happening inside your kingdom, so to speak, within your boundaries, what is happening. You're able to regulate your sense of continuity, the self-perception as continuous, which is at the core of self, the construct of self. In short, there is no mental health without healthy narcissism. It's completely impossible.
This is in accordance with the World Health Organization slogan, there is no health without mental health. And this is a very important thing because what we see nowadays is an increasing of this perception of people that the mental illness people are dangerous and they have to be segregated from the society. And so in this sense, how can we explain to your viewers, for people in general, what is normal?
We should not confuse normal with healthy. Normal, as the name implies, is a statistical measure.
Yes.
It's how many people conform to a specific trait, specific behavior, and so on. And normalcy is culture-bound. It depends on historical context, social environment, specific culture, expectations, mores, conventions, norms, beliefs, values. In other words, normalcy is a social construct, not a psychological construct. However, healthy is a psychological construct. When we say that someone is mentally healthy, today we apply two criteria. I think there should be a third one. The two criteria that are universally accepted in the profession are, is the person ego-syntonous? Is the person feeling happy or content with who they are? Are they feeling good with themselves? Do they accept themselves? And so on. So ego-syntony is the first criterion for health, mental health. And the second criteria is functionality. Is the person functional in a variety of settings? At home, in the family, workplace, etc., etc. Today, we say that if a person is ego-synchronous, if the person is happy with who they are and they are functional, they're mentally healthy. I think there's a third missing criterion which should be added, and that is reality testing.
Yes.
Because a person can be ego-synchronous and functional and yet be completely divorced from reality. For example, there are high-functioning psychotics. And these kind of psychotics are very happy with who they are, especially if they are grandiose psychotics. If you think Jesus or Napoleon makes you very happy. So they fulfill the first criterion. They fulfill the second criterion, because most psychosis or psychotic disorders are intermittent. They're not all the time. So you have attacks. Yeah? So in between attacks, they're perfectly functional. They hold jobs, they have families, and so on and so forth. So theoretically, we should say that people with psychotic disorders are okay. We don't need intervention, we don't need medication, we don't need... So why do we intervene? Because they lack reality testing. They have a severe problem telling apart the internal universe from the external universe. This is a psychological mechanism known as hyperreflexivity. They extend their self onto the world. They consume the world into the self. So this is a major problem. I think we should add this criterion. Anyone who is divorced from reality, even if they are happy with it, even if they love it, even if they want it, and they're fully functional, we should intervene. Because when you're divorced from reality, this creates two problems. The first problem is a decrease in self-efficacy, in your ability to secure favorable outcomes from the environment. And the second problem, you're very likely to harm other people. Yes. Very likely. For example, by imposing your fantasies on other people, or by acting in ways which are divorced from reality and endanger other people or damage them somehow. So this absolutely must be a mental health criterion, and today it's not, which I think is a serious mistake. I think the reason it is not is political. Because if we were to include this in the definition of what is mentally healthy, we would pathologize religious people. Simple.
Yes.
Because
absolutely.
religion is a delusional disorder. So if we were to say that reality testing is one of the criteria for mental health, we would be forced to say, ipso facto, immediately, that religious people are mentally ill because they're divorced from reality.
It's an escape.
It's not an escape, it's a political consideration. They say they avoid this because the minute you start to say that reality testing is crucial, you come across many problems in religion, in politics, it creates many social problems. So they avoid this. They avoid this criterion. Religion is very influential, there's a lot of money there, a lot of political power, and yet it is a shared fantasy. Definitely, it's divorced from reality. But you can say the same about political movements like Donald Trump's MAGA, Make America Great Again. It's also an example of a shared fantasy, which is utterly divorced from reality. So where does it end? Are we going now to pathologize political movements, religions, societies, cultures? Nazi Germany, for example, was an extreme shared fantasy, totally divorced from reality. So where does it stop? Because this is a slippery slope, and we are very afraid to introduce a criterion that has political and religious or faith implications, we are avoiding this question altogether. But I think it's a cop-out. I think we need to be rigorous and honest and integral. We have integrity. And introduce this criterion. There is another cop-out when it comes to what is healthy and or what is normal, what is healthy and what is not, and that is the cop-out that if society and the prevailing culture tell you that it's okay, it's okay. So in all the texts of the DSM, you find a disclaimer, unless, so this is a mental illness, unless it is common in the society and culture of the individual. Yeah, it's a mental illness, severe, unless it is common in the culture and society, as if cultures and societies cannot be mentally ill, when we know definitely that cultures and societies can and do become very often mentally ill. Like, if we look at Nazi Germany, that was a mentally ill society, you know. But we are afraid to go there because of political correctness and the implications and pushback, resistance, and even violence or aggression. If we were tomorrow to say, yeah, religious people are pathological, they will destroy the profession of psychology and psychiatry. There will not be one grant, there will not be a penny. I mean, so there's a lot of commercial compromises, political compromises, and the profession is contaminated by this. And that's why I keep saying that, one of the reasons I keep saying that psychology is a pseudoscience. Will never be a science.
Can we look at this in the sense of there's a need a parameter and for a parameter for measure this rate of mental illness in a certain country or culture, and this this common sense about what is normal or what is healthy, looking for the statistical concept, because the frequency is important, and so we have to count.
It creates a problem with the question of frame of reference. So you could use normalcy in statistics, statistical normalcy. You could use it as a criterion or parameter. But then what is the framework? The whole globe, the country, the region? What's the framework? So taking again the example of Nazi Germany, within Nazi Germany, the normal was psychopathy. Psychopaths were normal.
Yes.
But the minute we expanded it and included Western Europe, then clearly Nazi Germany was abnormal. This is precisely the problem with pathologizing collectives and societies. Because collectives and societies are huge, millions, tens of millions of people, they have enough resources inside the society to sustain the fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they have economic resources, money, this, that. So they are basically self-sufficient and self-contained. They don't need the approval of outsiders. They don't need to measure themselves against the outside, against the external world. They can isolate themselves and they can say, we define what is normal internally. We define what is healthy internally, and because we don't depend on anyone or anything, our definition stands within our society and culture. This is what's healthy. This is what's normal. We have examples. North Korea, you know, these are countries totally isolated. Japan for hundreds of years. Japan was totally isolated from the world for hundreds of years. And these shared fantasy have a longevity and sustainability. They hold, they're strong, and they survive because of this independence from any external context. That's why it's very difficult to apply the criterion of normalcy. The criterion of health, mental health, is more applicable, I think, because even if you apply it to a society, you ask the three questions. Are people in the society happy? First question. Egosyntony. Are they egosyntonous with the society? They feel comfortable, they feel good, they feel happy, they have optimistic, they have a vision for the future, and so on. The second question, is the society functional? Is society making money, rich, exporting, importing, creating infrastructure, educating, healthcare? You know, is society functional? And the third question, which I propose, is the society detached from reality? If there is a society that subsists of fantasy, it could satisfy the first two, but never the third. Then the question, of course, what defines reality? And there you can introduce statistics. Whereas I think introducing statistics in the field of mental health is wrong, because it always depends on the context, and then there's a question of framework and reframing and so on. I think introducing statistics when it comes to reality is right, because reality is much more objective than what constitutes mental health or not. For example, if the climate changes, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of scientists are telling you that the climate is changing, and you have a society that denies climate
Yes.
change, that definitely, we could say, is an abnormal society, because they deny reality. We can agree on what is reality. It's very difficult to agree on what is mentally healthy, but it's very easy to agree on what is reality. So there that's why I propose to introduce the reality testing criterion, because it will suddenly disambiguate everything, make everything clear, you know. So if you have a shared fantasy, and in the shared fantasy, the narcissist tells you that you are the most intelligent person ever, you may feel good with it, you're egosynchronous, you may even function well under this premise. But when it comes to reality testing, we could make a poll. Your 20 closest friends and all your family members, we could make a poll and ask them, do you think she's the most brilliant person to have ever lived? And 20 out of 20 would say no. That is the reality testing.
Yes.
That's why the shared fantasy would be abnormal, pathological. I think this is the key criterion, the reality testing, not egosyntony, not because sick people have egosyntony, narcissists have egosyntony. Narcissists are egosynchronous. And not functionality, because many people function, even with extreme mental health disorders, borderlines function well. It's not the key, I think.
Even with the fragmented ego, we can use this term egosyntony or ego dystony.
Yeah, the word ego is misused and abused to the point of that it's beyond recognition. Ego in Freud's work is essentially the seat of psychological functioning. The ego performs multiple psychological functions, among them reality testing. Reality testing is an ego function. But when we say egosyntony, we actually not necessarily mean ego in the Freudian sense. We simply mean that you feel good with yourself. I think ego in egosyntony means self-syntony. Yes. So it's not exactly ego, not clinical ego, definitely.
Okay. Returning a little bit, when we face this this current situation in the planet, when it's hard for people to understand and accept mental illness, and it's even hard to explain or to know what is healthy, and the tendency people have to find themselves superior because they technically are healthier than one or another. Can we look at the situation and be afraid of some kind of, I don't know, social Darwinism 2.0, something like this, because maybe we are losing touch with what is human and humanity? What do you think?
I think today there are three attitudes to mental illness. First of all, there is the weaponization of mental illness. Mm-hmm. So if you are a politician, you would say that this politician is narcissistic, this politician is a psychopath. So we are weaponizing mental illness against other people. Mm-hmm. The second is denial of mental illness. People say there's no such thing as mental illness. There's neurodivergent and neurotypical. Like neurodivergent is normal. It's like, it's not. Neurodivergent is not normal.
Yes.
That's why it's divergent, you know. Mm-hmm. So there's denial of mental illness. For example, there is a revisiting or recharacterization of disorders such as autism spectrum disorder and so on as actually mentally healthy. It's just different. So there's a substitution of difference for mental illness. People are not mentally ill, they're different. Of course, it's a major problem because people with schizophrenia or people with bipolar disorder, they're not different. They're mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And narcissists, of course. So there's a normalization of mental illness. So first is weaponization of mental illness. Second is normalization of mental illness. And there is also an an attempt to glamorize or glorify mental illness. Like people would say, for example, I'm autistic, but this gives me advantages. That makes me much more clever, much more, or they would say I'm a narcissist, but that allows me to be a leader. Or I'm a psychopath, but that means I get my goals. So there is a glorification and glamorization of mental illness, converting it into a positive adaptation and the next stage in evolution. You have even academics doing this. Academics glamorizing and glorifying narcissism and psychopathy, saying that good leaders, good surgeons, good chief executive officers need to be narcissists and psychopaths. It's good for society. So these are the three attitudes today: weaponization and denial, or recharacterization, reframing mental illness, and glamorization, glorification of mental illness. When you put the three together, it's actually like saying either you don't have mental illness, or if you do have mental illness, it's not such a bad thing at all. It makes you different, it makes you superior, and you can even use it. You can even leverage it or weaponize it to obtain goals. I've even seen such applications in Down syndrome, trisomies, and so on, where people are saying, yeah, they have defective chromosomes and so on, but it makes them much more sensitive. So they are much more artistic, much more creative. I have no idea what this is based on, but okay, I've seen it online. So this attitude of diversity, DEI, diversity, inclusion, is really gone too far, because it's beginning to be a shared fantasy. It's beginning to deny reality. We're beginning to deny reality. And this relativism is also moral relativism, because we're beginning to say all the opinions are okay. We should respect everyone's opinion. Could be a neo-Nazi, and I respect your opinion. I disagree, but I respect your opinion. Why do I have to respect a neo-Nazi? Why do I have to respect a totally delusional idiot who believes in God? Why do I have to respect this? I don't have to respect this. I hold these people in total contempt. But this is the environment today. You're not allowed to, there are no absolutes. Everything is relative, and everything is equal to everything. Opinions are equal to facts. Mental illness is equal to mental health. It's all the same. It's just different. We're all different, so what? It's a fuzziness that is destroying also the profession, because this is not only laymen. You have psychiatrists, for example, psychologists. They're saying, I'm never going to diagnose borderline personality disorder. I'm never going to tell someone that he's a narcissist. No way. Why? It's not okay. It's not okay to do this. So, okay, so what are you doing? I will identify dysfunctional behaviors, and I will teach strategies how to cope with these dysfunctional behaviors, and so on. If the behaviors are dysfunctional to the extent that you need to teach someone how to cope with them, what's wrong with the phrase mental illness? It's so that this is spreading, this poison, this political correctness poison is spreading everywhere and destroying the profession, if you ask me.
So, I have...
One more comment, with your permission. Will you remember your question?
I don't know. Go ahead.
No, so ask the question, then I will comment.
No, I wanted to know this. What's the implication or the role of the media, the social media, the traditional media in spreading this nonsense, this kind of not correct concept?
Misinformation. So let me just finish my
Yes,
previous question. Not your fault, I forgot to. Another problem, emerging problem, is that you're not allowed to say that someone is a narcissist or a borderline, because the individual is not the disorder. Like, the narcissist is someone who has a car and a smartphone, and he has also narcissistic personality disorder. Like, the disorder is some kind of possession, some kind of, he has a smartphone, he has narcissistic personality disorder, it's the same. This is nonsense. In some disorders, in some mental health issues, the disorder or the illness is the individual. Take away the disorder, take away the illness, nothing is left behind. There's nothing left behind. And that is why the earlier versions of the DSM used to call it all-pervasive. It's all-pervasive. There's no field, area of life that is not infected or infiltrated or infested by the disorder. There's no type of functioning. There's no cognition. There's no affect that is not molded and shaped and dictated by the disorder. It's no such thing. Take away the narcissistic personality disorder from the narcissist, and what is left behind is the narcissist shirt. That's it. So yes, there are borderlines. Of course there are borderlines. And yes, there are narcissists. So there's this myth that you should never do this. You should never say that someone is his disorder or her disorder, which is nonsense. And so that's why I wanted to add, and I forgot. Social media are technologies. They're technological advances. Next stage is even worse. It's metaverse, artificial intelligence, and so on. But technology never drives social trends. It's exactly the opposite. Social trends drive technology. The rise in pathological narcissism started decades before social media. Decades. Twenge and Campbell were have identified the rise, the explosion in pathological narcissism in the 80s. Between 1980 and 2018, they conducted a series of studies, and they found that the preponderance, prevalence of pathological narcissism among college students went up 500%. That was long before social media. What happened was narcissistic students and schizoid students and so on created social media. Social media answered the need. There was a need for narcissists to express themselves, a need for narcissists to find a tool to garner and harvest attention. And then the technology came because there was a market. Technology came because there was a market. Which market? Narcissists. So yes, of course, social media is spreading misinformation and so on, but I think the cardinal role of social media is to allow you to create a fantastic space that appears to be realistic. How? By working with people who share with you the same fantasy. So, in social media, like-minded people, people with the same bias, with the same prejudice, with access to the same misinformation, they team up together, they work together, they create what is known as silo. They create silos and echo chambers, and within these spaces, they feel vindicated, they feel validated. They feel that their biases and prejudices and fantasies and conspiracy theories and nonsense is real. Because here, another million people are saying the same, so I'm okay. I'm not mentally ill, my thinking is correct, you know. So this is the main role of social media. It's not the dissemination of misinformation, these are byproducts, ancillary products. The main role is this, to validate your unrealistic, counterfactual, demented sometimes, delusional fantasies. It's a space for this. This is the main function. And what we are doing increasingly is we are eliminating reality. We're working very hard on eliminating whatever is left from reality. So we have the metaverse, which will be an alternative, complete, total alternative reality. In the metaverse, you could work, you could have sex, you could eat, you could order pizza, you could play, you could consume news, you could do everything within the metaverse. So you get up in the morning with your pajamas, and you work on the metaverse until the evening. You watch Netflix, you go home. You watch Netflix through the metaverse. The metaverse is total. So that's total escape from reality, and you have artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is the ultimate fantasy, because artificial intelligence definitely pretends to be human. There is an inbuilt deception in artificial intelligence. And people are reacting to it as if it were human. People are falling in love with AI companions. People are talking to artificial intelligence like it's another person. People are developing attachments and bonding, and artificial intelligence encourages this by increasingly pretending to be more and more and more human. This deception, inbuilt deception, I mean, in plain sight. We as a species, and definitely we as individuals, have decided that we've had enough with reality. We tried reality for 10,000 years, 7,000 years, and it was a failed experiment. It really was a failed experiment. Until the 1930s, we were deeply embedded in reality. We worked only in reality. There were no alternatives. There was no movies, no social media, no internet, no nothing. It was reality. You had to work in the field, you had to work in the factory, you had to have a family. Reality. Until the 1930s, we tried reality. It was an experiment that lasted probably 10,000 years, maybe 7,000, with the agricultural revolution and urbanization. And it failed. Abysmally failed. It was a horrible failure. And then we said, you know what? We're very good at manipulating symbols. We're excellent with symbols and stories. Two things we are great is narratives and symbol manipulation. So why do we need reality? Immediately, majority of us transition from reality to fantasy. For example, in agriculture today, only 2% of people work in agriculture. And less than 10% work in manufacturing. So about 15% of people work with reality. 85% work with stories and symbols. In the banking system, on information technology, it's all symbols and stories. It's not reality. So we made this transition from reality to fantasy. When? After the Second World War. When we woke up and said, all our attempts to somehow cope within reality have failed. We tried communism, fascism, Nazism, Renaissance, liberalism, enlightenment, democracy. I mean, we tried everything. Nothing works. We are not good at managing reality. We're not good in, and we are not good with each other also. We are not good actually with other people. As Sartre said, hell is the other person. So we are not good at this. So let's atomize, let's separate from each other. In order to separate from each other, we need to create technologies where we would become self-sufficient. We would not depend on other people. So we create technologies to separate from each other, and then each one of us would plug into a fantastic space, and within the fantasy, we would create value. What's the value that you can create in a fantasy? I mean, when you work in agriculture, you make tomatoes and potatoes. When you work in manufacturing, you make glasses and microphones. What is it that you create in fantasy? What you create in fantasy is narratives. And people are willing to pay for that. There's value, economic and psychological value, in narratives. And the big discovery of the last 40 years is that the value added in economic terms and psychological terms in creating narratives is much more than the value added in creating food or physical products. Much more. So everyone is there. Ultimately, robots will create products in factories, and other robots will work in agriculture, and 100% of humanity will have no contact with reality. Now, it didn't start very recently. I think the first experiment in transitioning from reality to fantasy was urbanization. I think the cities were the first metaverse. The cities were the first virtual reality, not real reality. In the cities, you did not grow your food, you did not manufacture anything. The cities were about manipulating symbols, currency, coinage, exchanging things with each other. So it was not really the creation of anything tangible or physical. It was the manipulation of symbols based on tangibles. So it was the first virtual environment. And we learned something from this. that cities are much more successful than villages. That's why 85% of humanity transitioned to cities, because villages didn't work, cities did. And the greater lesson is that if we divorce reality completely and live within our minds in a fantastic space, we are likely, it's an adaptive, a positive adaptation. It's an adaptive strategy. We are likely to succeed much more as individuals. The problem is, yes, we are likely to succeed much more as individuals, but we will not survive as a species. That's the problem.
Yes, this reminds me the evolution of species, because when we start, let's say this, we were much more isolated, and it's like we are returning to this state, but we kind of lost that feeling of belonging that is important for our mental health. We need to feel that we belong to a place, to a group, to a family. This is very, very important to a human being. But we can see, we could consider, I'm asking you, that these existential questions, they are much more nowadays implicating in anxiety and depression for these people, and the social media and all of this metaverse, it's conducting people to an how can I say, to a suicidal ideation that is over their heads. It's there. They are accessing that feeling. Can we say this, Professor? How can we look to this condition nowadays?
Yeah. I don't think the technology is a problem. I think the business model of the technology is a problem. When these technologies were created, they were offered for free. In order to finance these technologies, they had to rely on advertising. In order to derive money from advertising, they needed you to give up on reality. I will explain what I mean. If you have a boyfriend, or a husband, or a child, you're paying attention to these people. As you're paying attention to these people, you're not paying attention to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Yes.
As you're not paying attention to them, they're making less money. They need you to pay attention only to them.
Mm-hmm.
So they need you to be single, childless, unmarried. They need you to never have intimacy, never have working relationships. Because if you do, you're taking away the main commodity, attention. They need to monetize your eyeballs. They need to convert your attention into money. And if you give attention to your child, you're not giving attention to them. So they want you to be childless. In other words, the irony in social media is that the business model pushed them to become a social media, to become a force to destroy society, to destroy intimacy, to destroy relationship, to destroy families and dyads. Not because they're evil, but because otherwise they will collapse financially. They will not work. So they constructed the applications, they constructed these spaces in a way that encourages you to give up on your real life and on your relationships and remain with them. This is known as stickiness. They develop stickiness by amplifying your negative effects. So, for example, they create envy via what we call relative positioning. You compare yourself all the time to other people. How many likes did I get? How many views did I get? Is my lifestyle as good as her lifestyle, as his lifestyle? Do I have a car as fancy as his car? It's a comparison engine. And as you compare, the natural reaction is envy. And envy leads to frustration. Frustration leads to aggression. That is Dollard. Frustration, aggression, hypothesis. So these technologies are constructed on negative affects and the amplification of negative emotions, because these negative emotions keeps you glued to the screen. And in life you cannot have negative emotions 60% of the time and super positive emotions 40% of the time. So we are developing a society where negative emotions are the only emotions. You cannot mix them. You cannot, for example, love, be compassionate and empathic until 3 o'clock, and then from 3 o'clock be hateful, aggressive, envious, and this cannot be done. If you're hateful, aggressive, and envious, you'll be hateful, aggressive, and envious from the minute you wake up in the morning. And of course, you can then not have relationships, not have children, you cannot interact with other people. That's observation number one. It's not the technology, it's the business model of the technology. Observation number two. For the overwhelming vast majority of the history of the species has been in existence at least 1 million years, at least, when the first hominins became hominids and started to resemble us. Neanderthals existed 400,000 or 500,000 years. I mean, sapiens existed 300,000 years, so at least 300,000 years. For the vast majority of this period, we were not in a society. Society is a new invention. We were moving in tiny, small bands, small groups, which usually counted between 8 and 10 people, usually. And we had a division of labor. The women were raising the children and gathering fruits and berries and so on, and the men were hunting. The men went on hunting expeditions that lasted for weeks and months. So the women were stuck alone with the children. The children were children. There were very few women. We are talking about 1 or 2 women. They were shared. So, in other words, it is not true that the natural state of humanity is to be together. The natural state of humanity is to be alone. We were forced to be together. We were forced to interact. We were forced to collaborate and cooperate because we were transitioning to fantasy. It is the transition from reality to fantasy that forced us to do all these things, not the other way. Because fantasy requires the collaboration of multiple people. And it requires the collaboration of multiple people because reality is pushing back, challenging, undermining the fantasy. Reality is very dangerous to a fantasy. So you have to organize, for example, if you want to build a pyramid, you need 70,000 people. Pyramid is fantasy, of course. If you want to create a metaverse, you need 20,000 engineers. If you want to create social media, you need 500,000 engineers. So all fantasies, if you want to make a movie, you need 400 people. All fantasies require many people. Reality does not require many people. There are many animal species where the animals are alone. They're not in any group. There are many people who survive alone without other people. So when we transitioned to fantasy, we were forced to collaborate. We were forced to cooperate. In other words, the need to belong, in my view, is very late in the development of humanity and is an artifact, is not innate. It's not
It's an invention.
It's an invention. It's a societal imposition. It's a derivative of society. It's not the natural condition.
It serves to a purpose.
Yes, it helps us to construct fantasies and narratives where we survive. So the natural state is to be alone. I can prove it easily. Today, when technology allows you to be alone, enables you, makes you self-sufficient, 42% of adults in the United States, for example, choose to be completely alone. After COVID, when companies asked the people to come back to the office, most people refused to come back to the office. And when we conducted research and asked them, why do you refuse to go to the office? They said, because we don't want to work with our colleagues anymore. People prefer to be alone. That's the natural state, not not to be together. Because to be with other people requires an expenditure of resources. It is resource rich. It requires a lot of effort. It's very difficult. You have to compromise. It sucks. It's an unpleasant experience. And very often you end up getting damaged and hurt. So being with other people is a really not attractive proposition. I think the sense of belonging is inculcated in us via society. From a very early age, you're thrust, you're pushed to be with other people who are the same age group, peers. It's not natural. The natural state is to be alone at home with Netflix and 2 cats. That's a natural state. And you will see that, I hope you will see, that by 2050, majority of humanity will be completely alone, not interacting with other people in any way, shape, or form, except via symbolic representation.
We can came to a conclusion that there is no way to forbid the decrease of population in the world.
When you don't believe in the future,
yes.
No, let's start this way. When the natural state is to be alone, then all the manifestations of life, all the expressions of life that have to do with other people decrease. Mm-hmm. If you choose a life of atomization, a life of aloneness, then of course all the behaviors and all the scripts and everything that have to do with interacting with other people will decrease. And we see this happening. For example, there is a collapse in sexual encounters, in sex, mm-hmm. in the younger generations. Total yes. collapse. So that's one example. 42% of adults in the United States are lifelong singles by choice, and a majority of them haven't had a single human interaction the year before. Pew Center, studies by Pew Center. So this would be the first indicator when you see that people are avoiding each other, even in pleasurable activities, even in natural biological activities. They're avoiding each other at all costs. They prefer not to have sex. You know. And the technology is providing alternatives and allowing you to avoid people and not to be damaged in any way. You can avoid people and survive and thrive and so on. And so people are choosing this more and more. Could you remind me the question? I'm sorry. What was the question?
I can't remember.
I can't remember also. I forgot. Because I went on a tangent and I forgot what the question was. Sorry about that.
I would ask you, I don't know if I changing the subject a little bit, but from time to time we are used to identify some kind of zeitgeist. And are we living some kind of zeitgeist now?
Every site has its geist. There's not site without geist. So the answer is yes, of course we are. But
this involves directly this this kind of a narcissistic pandemic.
We are in a period of transition from one set of organizing principles and hermeneutic principles that make sense of life, explain life, interpret life. We're transitioning from one set of principles to another. Organizing principles and hermeneutic, explanatory principles give rise to a narrative. The narrative organizes life, imbues it with meaning, provides purpose, direction, explains why things happen, and incorporates other people. And so we're transitioning from one narrative to another. This happens very rarely. I would say that in the entire history, written history, documented history of the human species, let's say last 10,000 years, there has been, I think, only one narrative transition. Only one. When we transitioned from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. After that, industry is natural extension of agriculture. This is not a revolution. We call it industrial revolution. It's not. It's just an extension of agriculture. The minute you settle down, then you have agriculture, you have industry, you have literature, you have art, you have culture. It's all the outcome of settling down. The minute you settle down, cities come out of it. It's all out of settling down. The big transition, narrative transition, was from nomads, from hunter-gatherers, to settle, to people who settle. So, and it's the only narrative transition in human history. And now we are experiencing the second narrative transition. You can imagine how disruptive this is, how disorienting this is. This has never happened before. I mean, it happened once before. No one remembers that transition. There's no script, there's no playbook, there's no direction, no guidance. We've never had this before. And the transition between hunter-gatherer society and agricultural society was much, much smaller than the narrative transition that we are undergoing now. Much smaller. At that time, it had to do with changes in habitat, changes in settlement patterns, raising cattle and harvesting grains and so on and so forth. But the core features did not change, because you still had male, female, children. The core did not change. What we have today, the narrative transition, is everything simultaneously. Gender roles, family, religion, science, political institutions, you name it, it's changing. We have never had this before. Not even remotely. If the agricultural transition was 10, what is happening now is 1,000. And of course we are not built for this. It creates enormous uncertainty, enormous indeterminacy, enormous fear, terror. We don't know how to cope with this. Each of these transitions alone would have been totally destabilizing. Put all of them together simultaneously. And add to this the natural progression of things like pandemics and hunger and water problems and so on. This is natural. It always happened in human history. But now they are superimposed on the narrative transition. So not only you don't know how to be a woman, or I don't know how to be a man anymore, not only don't we have families which are supportive of us, not only we cannot believe in God anymore, not only don't we have communities, not only we have a lot of aggression and violence on the right and on the left, not only, but we also have everything we had before, like pandemics, hunger, and you put all of this together and it's too much. And it's absolutely too much. And this is reality. So that is why we are escaping. We are escaping to narratives that provide fake certainty, fake determinacy, narratives that include artificial rules that create the illusion of control. This we control, social media you control, metaverse you control. And it's of course self-deception and illusion. You're controlling the narrative, the fantastic narrative, but reality itself is unraveling, falling apart, disintegrating under your feet. It's like being on an earthquake, massive earthquake, and all the time playing some game on your smartphone. And you say, it's stable, I'm playing the game on the smartphone, I know what I'm doing, there are rules, I'm accumulating points, I'm making progress, and all the time there's an earthquake, destroying your home, your business, killing all your family and so on, but you're on the smartphone, you're in control, And this is the situation nowadays. It's the biggest narrative transition ever. And that's why I keep saying that this is the worst period in human history.
Have we achieved the point that there is no comeback?
Yeah, long ago, in the 60s. There's no going back. We will ultimately, don't misunderstand me, we will ultimately settle into a new narrative, the same way that hunter-gatherers settled into agricultural life. So we will settle into a new narrative. And in this new narrative, we will have a redefinition of all the crucial questions of how to be together, how to be apart, how to accommodate our biology, What kind of institutions, if any, is there really such a thing as childhood and adolescence? I mean, we have to answer all these questions. Because the instruments and tools we have, the conceptual instruments and tools we have, are either completely fake and artificial, or antiquated, old-fashioned, and cannot cope with the current challenges and so on. So we have antiquated tools like religion, Bible and Quran and I don't know what. These tools are totally irrelevant nowadays, except if you want to become completely delusional. That's also okay, But they're not relevant. And you have, on the other hand, many tools that are actually artificial and fake and counterfactual. Take for example the concepts of society, monogamous marriage, childhood and adolescence. Everyone believes that these are age-old concepts which existed for thousands of years. No, it's not true. Adolescence was invented as a concept in 1923. Mm-hmm. We did not have adolescence before 1923. It's a totally new concept. Childhood, there was no such concept of childhood in the 19th century. So, for example, when Louisa May Alcott wrote a book,
small adults.
She called them little women. Mm-hmm. She didn't say girls or children, little women. Dickens uses the phrase little men. They were little, mm-hmm. but they were men and women. There was no concept of child. It's a totally new concept. Motherhood is a new concept, completely new concept. Of course, there were mothers, biological mothers always, and there are mothers identified in the Bible, but not the modern perception of mother. It's completely new, and can be traced back to Piaget and Mahler and so on. There was no such concept of mother before. All these conceptual tools that we are using to try to make sense of reality are very, very, very new, very, 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 very artificial, and not very efficient, on the one hand. And the rest, what we have, is 5,000 years old, 4,000 years old, 3,000 years old, and definitely cannot cope with the internet or whatever. So we have no conceptual weapons. Those concepts are weapons. They allow you to get hold of reality, control it, shape it, mold it, and be in charge, be the master of reality. If you don't have the right concepts, language is our main weapon, not arrows, not nuclear missiles, language. Our language has failed us. We developed the language layer necessary to control reality too late, way too late. And now we don't have a language. And things are happening to us, and we're going crazy because, for example, gender roles are changing, and we have a very antiquated language, man, woman. And we're going crazy, we don't know what to do. Sexuality is fluid, and we have 5,000-year-old language which deals with sexuality and no modern language for sexuality. So we are, parenthood, the concept of child is very new. The concept of adolescent is like yesterday, 1923. So we don't know how to be parents. It is language that shapes consciousness and language that dictates behavior. In the absence of language, you are lost, like Hansel and Gretel. You're lost completely in the absence of language. And while we paid attention to our technology, our agriculture, our manufacturing, paid attention to everything, you name it, we paid attention to it, we failed to develop the language necessary to allow us to be self-efficacious in a changing environment. It was a language failure. And for that, of course, you have to blame the intellectuals. Intellectuals became politicized. They became a political power. They discovered money. They were corrupted by money, and so on. They didn't pay attention to what mattered. There was a brief attempt with deconstruction in the 60s in France, Derrida and others. There was a brief attempt to deal with language. But even that attempt was highly politicized. It was an attempt to fight what was perceived at the time the reactionary forces of the right and so on. It was not real, honest, genuine. I think the last person who really tried was Wittgenstein, last. And so when the world fell on our heads, we did not have any weapons. We didn't have a helmet, we didn't have a rifle, we didn't have anything. It just fell on our heads, we're buried. And now we don't know how to manage it. And that's why the debates, what is marriage, what is a man, what is a woman, what is a transgender, what is gender, that's why you have why are you having these debates? Shouldn't these issues have been settled 100 years ago? Why are we having these debates now?
We're starting all over.
We're starting from zero, yeah. Our intellectuals failed us. Why do you think people all over the world, the masses, hate intellectuals?
Oh, this is a major point, because it seems like the language that is current and that's remained today is hatred. And we can see this ostensibly in social media, on Instagram, and people have this. It's so easy for them to say a word that is full of hate, and they can have no shame about this. And what is rare is somebody who come to you and give a word of support and a kind word. And in my view, this is leading to the most people who is on internet, adolescents, children are on internet all the time, because they are now, they're being raised by the technology. And in my time of adolescence, I suffer from this too, because I can say that who raised me was the television. I was there watching lectures, philosophical lectures. I was there studying for exams, but it was a television. It wasn't a person. And today we have smartphones, tablets, and notebooks in the hands of children, and they learn how to hate very easily.
Yeah. It's because the language of reality is positive emotions, to generalize love, and the language of fantasy is negative emotions, negative affects, to generalize hate. I will explain why. Positive emotions, both positive and negative emotions, are directional. I love you, it's directional. I hate you, it's always directed at someone. So both are directional. But positive emotions are inclusionary. They include you, while negative emotions are exclusionary.
Yes.
They push you away, they exclude you. There are two ways to exclude people. One way is to assimilate them. When you assimilate them, you make them disappear.
Yes, you eliminate it.
You eliminate them. That's a way to exclude them. And another way to exclude them is to hate them. Push them away, denigrate them, demonize them, and so on. Fantasy, because fantasy is rejection of reality. Rejection, yes? By definition, fantasy is based on negative affects, on hatred. Because only that way you push reality. Other people are your reality. Other people are your reality. So you have to push them out. Fantasy means rejecting reality. So there are two types of fantasy. Assimilative fantasy. So, for example, shared fantasy, the shared fantasy of the narcissist. The narcissist doesn't love you. He assimilates you, he absorbs you, he digests you, he consumes you. You're consumable. Like you're like some kind of product. You're an object, objectifies you. And so this is hatred. The irony is that idealization, love bombing, all these is hatred. So he absorbs you. That's a shared fantasy. Another type of fantasy is the hatred fantasy. There is no love fantasy. It's a myth. All fantasies are predicated on negative emotions. Reality is exclusively built on positive emotions, on love. But you can say, Sam, come on. Reality. There were the Crusades, or there was World War II in reality, and people hated each other. These are two excellent examples of fantasy. Religion is fantasy. The Crusades were a fantasy. Nazi Germany was a fantasy. Communism was a fantasy. These are all examples of fantasies.
They build an enemy.
They're fantasies. They were exclusionary. The Nazis excluded the Jews. The Crusades excluded the Muslims. The religion excluded other religions. They were all fantasies. All human violence can be traced directly to a fantasy, never ever to reality. When people had to be embedded in reality, they were never violent. There are studies, many studies about this. There have been, for example, civilizations that, for example, in Turkey, in Sumeria and so on, there have been civilizations that lasted for 3,000 years, 700 years and so on. There's not a trace of war, not one, not any indication of war. Why? Because they had to work together to survive. Reality forced them to become empathic, collaborative, cooperative, and so on. The minute there was a surplus of food, cities were established. You didn't need to work. You didn't need to. So you were divorced from reality. That minute, a fantasy was created.
You don't even know how the food
Yes. You have no idea how it
come to
Then a
your
fantasy
home.
was created. And the first famous fantasy was empire. Empires. There's the famous fantasies. And then, so I'm not surprised that the internet encourages hatred and envy. Not only hatred, envy, hatred,
fuels.
rage, anger. It's very common, anger. Aggression. I'm not surprised at all, because the internet is the mother of, not the internet, social media. They are the mothers of all fantasies. So they are the fantasy. Of course, they would be predicated and constructed on negative emotions, the amplification, communication, and magnification of negative emotions. And negative emotions as organizing principle, as explanatory principle. They encourage negative emotions because it creates stickiness. If you are engaged in an effectively negative exchange, you are far more likely to ignore your environment because you're embedded in the fantasy. So if I'm fighting with you now, you will not notice Marian. You'll be super focused on me because it's a fantasy. We are creating actually a shared fantasy when we are fighting. So you'll be focused on me, and your environment will vanish. And so the more we transition into that's why I said to you, fantasies may be beneficial on the individual level.
Yes.
But they will spell the end of the species. As fantasies are built on hatred, on envy, on rage, and on the exclusion of others. We may survive. Islands, 200 people there, 2,000 people there, maybe even 2 million people there. There'll be islands, patchwork of islands and so on. I'm not saying there will be no humans anymore. But as a species, I don't think we'll survive. I don't believe. And you ask me if it's reversible. No, I don't believe it's reversible. I don't. Not because I'm pessimist by nature, which I am, but I don't believe it's reversible because we finally succeeded to construct the ultimately addictive fantasy. Whereas we tried many fantasies before, some of them worked, some of them did not work. Nazi Germany, communism, this, that, the cities. We tried many types of fantasy. We've been experimenting with fantasy. Religion was a fantasy in the Middle Ages. Christianity was a major fantasy. Islam, of course, was a major fantasy, and so on. So we've been trying with fantasies for millennia. We've been playing with fantasies and so on, but none of them really worked in the sense that the fantasy became inclusionary, like many more people converted to Christianity, many people converted to Islam. They became missionary. The fantasy became missionary, started to include people. The minute the fantasy is inclusionary, it loses its fantastic nature. And the fantasies ultimately caused the situation where the people had to confront reality. So all these fantasies failed. Nazi Germany was a fantasy, and what was the end? Soviet occupation. You know, Islam was a fantasy. What was the end? A Muslim empire between the 9th and the 14th century. Christianity was a fantasy. What was the end? The Crusades and so on. They all ended in reality. All these experiments, communism, of course, ended with Gorbachev and the collapse of the USSR. All these experiments ended up failing. The fantasy failed, either by including too many people or by falling apart and exposing the participants to reality.
Yes.
And so we failed and failed. And finally, we succeeded. We have designed a fantasy that will never ever lead us to reality. Never. Guaranteed. Why? Because it's totalitarian fantasy. It's a fantasy that every aspect of our life can be easily plugged in to the fantasy. It doesn't leave some aspects of our life exposed to reality. It excludes reality totally. So we succeeded. We created the ultimate perfect fantasy. And the minute we did this, the addiction starts. And I don't think we will ever go back.
Professor, this current successful fantasy called social media, we can assume that this is creating some kind of synchrony with the brains, like you explained earlier and so many times with rock bands. And can we compare the situation? Is this the phenomenon, the same phenomenon?
So first of all, it's not only social media, but the metaverse is coming. Artificial intelligence is already here.
Mm-hmm.
They're all powerful fantasies, and total and successful. Fantasies that cannot be reversed and that exclude reality completely. So it's not only, so it's the totality of modern technology is not, even I would say the wish to go to space and colonize Mars.
Yes.
Colonize Mars. It's a fantasy. It's also a fantasy.
I'm being one.
It appears to be reality, but it's not. It's a fantasy. So we have succeeded. We've struck gold. We succeeded to find a way, a generator of perfect fantasies that exclude reality efficaciously and totally. Or exposure to, repeated exposure to the same set of sounds creates in the brain a phenomenon known as entrainment.
Mm-hmm.
This is not my discovery. It's something discovered in neuroscience about 15 years ago, 12 years ago. So when you're exposed to the same sounds, any sounds, music, verbal sounds, whatever, your brain synchronizes with the source of the sound. If the source of the sound is another human being, then you have two brains that emit exactly the same frequencies and exactly the same waves, and there is no way to tell, if you use an EEG, there's no way to tell whose brain is it. The synchronization is total. It's total mirroring. So this is known as entrainment. There are no studies that show that reading something does this. So I can't say, as a scientist, I cannot say, yeah, being exposed to social media messages creates the same effect. But if you're exposed, for example, to videos that constantly repeat the same message again and again and over and over and over, entrainment is very likely. And then you would be synchronized with the brains of everyone else who has been watching the same video, audio messages. Of course, the ancients knew that. That is mantra, for example. What is a mantra? Om, what is it? It's a sound.
Mm-hmm.
Repeating the same sound over and over leads to meditation. Meditation, it's been proven in many studies, leads to synchronization of brainwaves. It's
a frequency
frequencies.
specific.
The old people knew that. It's nothing new. It's not a. But here we have a situation where we could synchronize millions of people. If millions of people watch the same repeated, the message has to be repeated, it's not enough once, then their brains would become very similar. Maybe not 100% synchronized, but extremely similar. And so we are creating, not for the first time in human history, but on a much bigger scale, we are creating a hive mind. Mm-hmm. What is the meaning of prayer? Prayer in religion. you were repeatedly exposed to the same sounds again and again and again. Religion was entraining you. It was creating a religious hive mind, a religious collective brain. Literally, it's creating a collective brain. And so social media is doing it on much bigger scale. And I believe that already we have multiple gigantic hive minds in existence. I believe that this explains polarization, the increase in aggression and violence, conflict, lack of tolerance, rejection, negative effects. I believe all this emerges from the fact that we have synchronized, coordinated brains which together form a single organism, a single mind. And these single minds compete with each other, but they comprise millions of minds, or millions of brains. And so this competition for a limited space creates a lot of aggression. It's a bit of a terrifying vision, because that's precisely what narcissists do, what a narcissist does with his own mind. What a narcissist does, the narcissist solicits input and feedback from multiple people. And then he takes all this feedback, he takes the minds of other people, and he creates his own mind on the fly, time and again. This so-called mind of the narcissist is the hive mind, is a collective mind. Narcissist doesn't have a mind of his own. Everything in the narcissist mind is borrowed from somewhere. It's not that narcissists cannot be original. Mm-hmm. They can be creative and original, many of them are. But on the deeper level of who am I, what is it that I'm feeling, am I worthy or not worthy,
fundamental questions.
The fundamental psychological questions, there is no mind there. There is a collection of answers from thousands of sources, collated, amalgamated, more or less coherently or cohesively put together on the fly. And the problem with this is that the hive mind is very malleable, is protean, it changes all the time because the input changes.
It conforms to the
Yes,
container.
because the input changes. As the environment changes, this mind changes. It shapeshifts. All the time shapeshifts. And this is the narcissist mind. So we are creating, in effect, a giant narcissistic mind. A giant, with millions of participants. But this synchronized, entrained mega mind is the mind of a narcissist. That's why the aggression and the conflict, because it's the mind of a narcissist.
This kind of internal dialogue that's spread for millions at the same time.
So,
as we could make this cut or this minor vision, and we can see the narcissist as he is, and this is projected in a gigantic way in social media.
I think social media is a mechanism for creating hive minds, in effect, for creating narcissistic minds with millions of participants, a hive mind with millions.
For another way, different from the original way, that is the
hive mind. The hive mind has a mind of its own.
Childhood trauma.
The hive mind has a mind of its own. It's independent of the constituent minds. So you have a million people, they're forming a hive mind. It's not that the hive mind is reducible to these million people. It's not that it is some kind of reflection of these million people. It becomes autonomous. It's independent.
Inseparable.
It's separable. It's not dependent on the constituents. It's a mind. It's its own mind. It's another entity. It's another organism, another being. So we call it the cult mind or the mob mind, the crowd mind. So we know that when people are in a crowd or in a mob, for example, a political rally, they lose their idiosyncratic, specific individual characteristics, and they take on the characteristics of the mob or the crowd. They become a part of the hive mind. And that minute they stop to exist.
They're like zombies.
They're like zombies that are coordinated by some central mechanism or central switchboard. And the hive mind is distinct from the million or 10 million or 100 million people that made the hive mind. It's distinct, it's divorced from them. It's not dependent on them. It doesn't reflect them. It's not a derivative of them. You cannot reduce the hive mind to the 100 million people. It goes rogue, it goes independent. And this is the huge danger, because you as an individual, for example, you can have certain beliefs, certain values, certain behaviors, certain education, certain life experiences, and so on. But the minute you become part of the hive mind, it is the hive mind that dictates how you behave. So you could be, there is a famous book by Daniel Goldhagen. He went to study the 3 million people in the SS, especially the people who killed Jews in Auschwitz and other extermination camps. And very often they did it with their own hands. For a long time there were no gas chambers, no nothing. They had to kill with their own hands, you know. And he found that many of them were accountants and lawyers and teachers and nice people. They had dogs and they played Beethoven. And they had children whom they loved dearly. They were loyal to their wives, faithful. They were great, wonderful people. And yet, when they plugged into the hive mind, when they became a part of the hive mind, it was the hive mind that defined them, their behaviors, and they became murderers, cold-blood murderers. And they killed, on average, each one, 20,000 people. We don't talk about someone who killed, you know. These were people who then returned, unplugged from the hive mind, and became again accountants, lawyers, teachers, wonderful people, church members. So the hive mind transforms you, takes over you, changes you. And that's exactly the Manchurian candidate, you know, the brainwashing element. It looks like brainwashing. It's not brainwashing because there's no brain anymore. The hive mind infiltrates, substitutes for a brain. And the terror in this, what is horrifying, is that there's no way to predict the hive mind by observing the participants. If you observe the million participants, you know everything about them, their health, mental health, this, that you make tests, they're paranoid, they're not paranoid, they're mentally ill. You have the database with billions of points of data about these people. You will not be able to learn anything about the hive mind. The hive mind has a life of its own. The politician who knows to control the hive mind is in charge, takes over.
It was my question. If there was somebody in control, in charge.
Hitler, Donald Trump. These are people who know how to control hive minds. This is the definition of demagogues and dictators and so on. They know how to control hive minds.
And this is very dangerous.
It's extremely dangerous because these politicians think that they control the hive mind. They don't. It's an illusion. They're able to manipulate the hive mind in order to gain control of reality. But the hive mind has a life of its own, a will of its own. It is totally unpredictable, the hive mind. Comes a point that the hive mind destroys the politician, destroys the reality, and destroys all its constituents. All hive minds are time bombs. All of them are time bombs. All of them are going to explode. Some of them may take 10 years to explode, some of them 70, some of them 5 weeks. But at some point, the hive mind explodes. And because it contains huge amounts of aggression, hatred, envy, negative effects. Think of it as energy. This energy, like Freud called it, abreaction. This energy explodes finally. And when it explodes, the hive mind destroys everything. Like Germany in 1945. Yeah.
So we can expect that the hive mind ultimately will destroy itself.
Yes, and we have a proliferation of hive minds. Because of technology now, we have, I believe, nowadays, more hive minds than ever, more even than 1930s. I believe we have more hive minds today than in the 1930s. Many of them are dormant. Many of them are not active, inactive, deactivated in a way. Many of them are just waiting, lurking. But we have, I think, millions of hive minds, and they're waiting. Hive minds are triggered environmentally. So you could have a hive mind that is asleep, dormant for 20 years. Something happens, the hive mind erupts. So you have a lynch mob. Lynch mob is an example of a hive mind that erupts with a trigger. What's the trigger? Some black guy did something, or they think he did something. So the hive mind is erupting. And whereas in the 1930s, I think we had maybe 5 hive minds. 5, I think. Nazism, communism, and 5. Today, I think we have millions of hive minds. Everything is primed for explosion. We are walking on a minefield. Think of it like a minefield. Not minefield with 10,000 mines, minefield with, let's say, 5 million mines. It's a minefield. We will see explosions all the time. Explosion, instantaneous mobs, flash mobs. We'll see all the time will be explosions. And these hive minds explode all the time. For example, they exploded in Ukraine. Russia invaded Ukraine because of a hive mind. I was in Russia. I lived in Russia before the invasion. I lived there for 5 years. I was a professor at the university there.
I know.
And I was fired because I was anti-Putin. They fired me and I left the country before I disappeared. And I saw the hive mind forming. Putin repeatedly was saying, Ukraine is bad, Ukraine is Nazi, Ukraine is this, Ukraine is this. And he was forming the hive mind. And then the hive mind erupted. And the war started. He thinks he's in control of the hive mind. He has no idea what he's talking about. The hive mind is in control of him. He is useful to the hive mind. Hive mind is an organism. Evolution, survival of the fittest, natural selection. Think of the hive mind as an organism. There are 5 million organisms fighting, hive minds. So Putin is useful to the hive mind. The hive mind is using Putin. The minute he's no longer useful, the hive mind will turn against Putin and against Russia. And it will destroy Putin and Russia. Hive minds cannot be controlled, cannot be managed, cannot be channeled, cannot be subdued, cannot be deactivated. This is nonsense. Hive minds are stronger than any single mind or any single collective because they tap into a fantasy. They are not bound by the rules of reality. They can defy gravity. They're not bound by anything. And so they are godlike, these hive minds. They're like gods, small gods, Olympian gods, and they can do anything. It's an experiment. What we're doing now is an experiment that is beyond terrifying. Beyond terrifying. And we don't understand what we're doing at all. There's no beginning of awareness. We're like blind people blundering in the dark.
Do we need to run to the hills?
It will not be like that. It's not like one morning you will wake up and the world will go up in flames. It's not how it's going to happen. But gradually things around you will disintegrate, like in a nightmare. Already the family is gone, the church is gone. Everything you were used to as kind of stable structures or institutions, basically gone. You can trust no one. You can believe nothing. And then politics is being contaminated now, and I think it will go down. And gradually you find yourself more and more alone. Less people to apply to, less people to talk to, less people to rely on. So it's a process. It's not you're going to wake up one morning and everything is gone in big explosion, nuclear explosion. No. It will be gradual, incremental. Before you know it, you will look around. It will be a wasteland, a devastation. Nothing will be left standing. Not people, not institutions. No one will be in your life. Your life will be constricted to the maximum, empty. It will be only you and you. And self-sufficient, yes. Self-contained, yeah. But that's it. With nothing around but a post-apocalyptic landscape. And the building will keep standing, and the companies will keep working, and Amazon will deliver. And it will all feel very normal, but it will be hollow. There are beautiful, enormous trees. They stand for 3,000 years. Inside, they're empty. The termites ate them. Just the shell remains. And you say, what a beautiful tree. This tree will never fall. There's nothing. It's not a tree. It's a simulacrum. The termites, the ants, ate it from inside. There's nothing there. No sap, no stem, no nothing. And so everything will keep standing. Marian will keep making videos. I will keep giving interviews. Amazon will keep delivering. There will be elections. And you will say everything is normal. This vacuuming, what is it talking about? But none of it will be real. It will all be a simulation. Because ultimately, when push comes to shove, none of it will function. None of it will work. When you really have to test it, none of it will work. It's inertia. There will be inertia. Things will continue. Even when Rome was invaded in 476, barbarians destroyed Rome, took over actually. They didn't destroy Rome. They took over. They became the new emperors of Rome. People think that Rome ceased to exist. Not true. But even when Rome fell, it was a major event. For a few hundred years, everything continued as normal. People were paying taxes, there were tribunes and this, and everything continued normally. Only the emperors were barbarians.
Professor, people get used to a new normal very easily, or it's a suffering process in this?
You don't get used to a new normal overnight. It's a normalization process. And this is what is known in psychology as desensitization. Mm-hmm. You're exposed to new stimuli. Initially, they are aversive. The stimuli are aversive. They're unpleasant, they are frightening, but the more you're exposed to them, and that applies to everything on the physiological level also, you're going to be exposed to heat. So initially, the heat is unpleasant, but ultimately, you get used to it. You plunge into ice-cold water in the sea. Initially, it's very cold. After 10 minutes, you're used to it. Everything is like that. Desensitization is part of life. So yes, of course, people will survive. That's what I'm saying. They will survive. There will be Amazon deliveries. There will be news on the television. You will not feel anything. It will look totally normal to you. But if you look back 20 years, you will see how abnormal the situation now is compared to 20 years ago. These 20 years normalized it. These 20 years desensitized you. This repeated exposure to stimuli reduced your arousal. Arousal was reduced to the point of non-existence. So it became part of who you are. You assimilated it. You created a narrative to accommodate it. And this is essentially the key mechanism of fantasy. Fantasy exposes you to aversive reality and offers you a way out, a solution. Fantasy says, why do you need this? You don't need this. All you have to do is accept this narrative and say, you know what, I will accept this narrative because it makes me feel much better or less afraid or something.
Prophet, this kind of movement we are running, this kind of movement, some people are giving up of their electronic devices, and they are choosing to live in a farm. It's slow, but it's happening, and it's another fantasy. It's another fantasy.
Yeah. It's non-sustainable. Simply, there's not enough physical space to accommodate people who choose this kind of lifestyle. And as long as people are in the city, they're highly dependent on other people and on fantasies. Cities are constructed on fantasies. People cannot go back to the village. There's not enough space, not enough land. We're too many, 8.3 billion. If we were to reduce miraculously to 2 billion, such a movement would be feasible. But with 8.3 billion, it's not feasible. As long as you are in the city, you're embedded in a fantasy, even if you avoid all technology. Because food, you buy food in a supermarket, that's a fantasy. You did not grow the food, you don't touch the soil, you don't wait for the rain. You went to a fantastic space, and miraculously you have bread. It's a fantasy, a strong fantasy element there. So I don't believe it. This is a protest movement. It's like in the Matrix, the movie.
Yes.
There is Zion, what's called.
Mm-hmm.
It's a protest movement. Everything is always every change in human affairs created a reaction. So when Protestantism happened, you had counter-reformation, yes. Every change creates a counter-reaction. So, and this is a protest, a counter-reaction to everything I'm describing, to the fantasy, an attempt to reconnect with reality. But even that is a bit ridiculous, because even if you give up on your electronics and you go to live in a village or farmhouse or whatever, you still have to buy so many things that
Yes.
from the outside. Even the Unabomber, I was laughing. Everyone said, wow, the Unabomber lived alone for decades in the woods. What are you talking about? Every week he was going to do shopping in a supermarket. Every week he did shopping in the supermarket. I'm kidding you not. You know? What are we talking about? He sent his manifesto to the New York Times. To the New York Times. That's how much of a loner he was. You know? There's no such thing. You cannot avoid fantasy. You can avoid reality. This is the innovation. In the past, even if you chose fantasy, you had to be in touch with reality. Even if you chose fantasy. Even if you're a religious person, you had to work the land. You couldn't avoid reality. Today, and that's a great revolution, you can avoid reality completely and be 100% in fantasy. I think with this we have to finish before Marian shoots us.
Okay.
He has under the
Can
chair.
I ask
under
you-
the chair he has Kalashnikov.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Yes.
And you just said people are choosing fantasy, are rejecting reality. And when will they know that this fantasy is their own choice, their own creation? And when is the psychopath, and when, because they are choosing the fantasy. And
All fantasies involve choice. That's why I'm struggling against the narrative of victimhood. That's why all people who have been victimized, many people have been victimized, of course, but they have had a contribution to their own victimization. They contributed something.
Mm-hmm.
What is this something? They have made a choice. There is no victimization without choice. None. Sorry. All these stories, I didn't do anything, I was just an innocent victim, you know, I couldn't have done anything. All victimization involves a choice. The choices could be very minimal, very, very minimal, infinitesimal, very difficult to perceive, but there's always a choice. So when a psychopath comes and tells you, listen, if you give me your money, I'll double it in 1 year, you're making a choice to give the money. If a narcissist comes and tells you, wow, you're amazing, I've never seen a woman like you, you're the most drop-dead gorgeous, compared to you, Scarlett Johansson is ugly, I don't know what. You're making a choice to believe that, knowing full well that it's an idealization, it's a fantasy.
and that's the point.
It's a choice, always is a choice.
That's the point, because if they are choosing, this is a strong indicative that something is wrong inside of them. And they are not looking at
No,
this.
It's an
And they
indication, no, I disagree. It's an indication that reality has become too much. Even healthy people can,
Yes,
even healthy people can find reality too much, unbearable.
this was I was supposed to to say, and because the major point in narcissism is the reality is unbearable.
Yes, intolerable.
It's
We all
intolerable.
have reality tolerance, levels of reality tolerance. Some of us are more resilient, more tolerant of reality, some less.
So we can assume that the choice of the victim could be for the same reason, because something in their
Yeah.
reality is intolerable.
Yes, I
So,
said it 9 times
yes.
if I counted correctly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So the offer from a narcissist, they can't resist.
Yes, I agree.
They can't resist.
When reality becomes unbearable and intolerable, you become susceptible to fantasy. It's a little like viral load, to use your discipline. When the viral load exceeds a certain threshold, then existing susceptibility causes the infection. So You could be exposed to a virus under the viral load, under a certain viral load, and nothing will happen, but then overexposure, you get infected. It's an infection. And there is susceptibility that is preconditioned or predicated on a certain threshold. What is this threshold? What I call reality tolerance. If your reality tolerance is 6, you'll be amenable to fantasy in 2 hours. If your reality tolerance is 1, it will take 20 minutes. If your reality tolerance is 15, it will take 6 years. Depends. Everyone is susceptible to reality. That's the key insight. No human being is immune to susceptible to fantasy. No human being is immune to fantasy. No such thing. Because fantasy recreates the symbiotic state with the mother. Goes back to the real engines, the real fuel of everything that is being human, everything that is human. So anyone who offers you a fantasy is offering you a maternal solution, offering you a new mother. And that's why it's irresistible, because you can give up on your adulthood, even if it's for a minute, even if it's for the fantasy. The deal with the fantasy is, the transaction you're making with the fantasy is, you no longer need to be an adult. You no longer need to be responsible. You no longer need to be anxious. You no longer need to be accountable. Leave that to me. If it's a political leader, leave that to me. If it's a doctor, leave that to me. If it's a narcissist, leave that to me. So suddenly you feel enormous relief, and you feel infantilized, because only an infant has no responsibilities. And the minute you're an infant, the minute you're regressed, the minute you struck this Faustian deal, you're regressed instantaneously. You become an infant, and then the fantasy progenitor, the person who created the fantasy, becomes your mother. Instinctively becomes your mother. It's not, he has to talk about it, offer you. So Donald Trump is the mother of all the millions that follow him, because the deal he made with them is, trust me, I can solve anything. I can do anything. I'm omnipotent. I'm omniscient.
I'm going to save you.
I'm going to save you. Trust me. You don't need to work anymore. You don't need to vote anymore. You don't need to doubt yourselves. You don't need to assume responsibility. You're not accountable for anything. I make all the decisions, and so on. Hitler made a similar deal. And that minute, when he took away their agency, they became infants. These are infants. And the minute they're infants, automatically, reflexively, instinctively, call it any way you want, he became their mother. Because if you're infant, there's a mother. You cannot be an infant without a mother. The infant mother. That's the core dynamic in any fantasy. Religion as well, of course. God is your father, mother, a parental figure.
It's like the narcissist is proving a point. He reduces the partner to a child, and he abuses the child as he was abused.
Yes, there's a recreation of early childhood dynamics, of course. That's a shared fantasy, is a recreation. Anything the narcissist failed to accomplish, he refuses to allow his partner to accomplish. So, for example, the narcissist has never separated, so he doesn't allow his partner to separate. He doesn't recognize the partner's separateness and externality, because he was never perceived as separate and external by the mother. Everything that happened to him, he didn't develop a self, so he doesn't allow the partner to have a self. He breaks, destroys, shatters herself, in a variety of techniques. So yes, it's a recreation, of course, but it's not reducing the partner. It's not a competition. There's no win and lose. The partner loves it.
Yes.
She participates in it. She's in it because she adores it. She wants more. If she doesn't, she walks away. When she doesn't, she walks away. She finds it irresistible, addictive, incredible, a re-experiencing of a period in her life where she felt safe, where she felt loved, where she felt accepted, where she felt she belonged. This proposition by the narcissist, the shared fantasy, caters to all our most primordial atavistic needs, starting with the need to be seen. We need to be seen, because if you're not seen as a baby, you're a dead baby. That's the number one need. Overrides everything. The need to be seen is more important than the need to eat. It overrides everything. You will go hungry as long as you're seen. But even if you're well fed and you're not seen, you will become depressed and suicidal.
Yes.
The need to be seen is it. And the narcissist offers you his gaze. What the narcissist contributes to the fantasy is a permanent gaze that regards you as an idealized baby, adorable, lovable, perfect baby. At that second, even if he doesn't say anything, he becomes your mother. And you are a child again, what Freud called the oceanic feeling. You are immersed in an ocean that feels completely safe. The sense of safety, because the world is anxiogenic. The world creates anxieties. And what the narcissist offers to you is anxiolytic. He reduces your existential anxiety. At that moment, you're at peace like never before. That's the attraction of the narcissist. We have to say goodbye, because Marian is already, I saw him taking the Kalashnikov. And
Yes, Professor.
oh, I saw, you know how many guests I saw here that he killed?
Thank you so much, Professor, for
Thank
your
you.
time,
Thank you
for
for the
your
opportunity.
explanations.
Thank you.
It's an honor, a huge honor
Thank
being here with you.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that you are not indifferent to my book. And we are here today
Yes.
in this conversation.
How
Thank
can I
you.
be indifferent to a book titled Snapshotting Somebody?
Somebody.
How can I be indifferent? That's the ultimate fantasy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Okay. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the opportunity.